25% of the original Flutter community crew represented here. And I'm talking about people going back to Alpha. So we have Thomas Burkhardt, creator of RxVMS and master of streams.
And get it.
We have Simon Whitefoot, he knows everything. We've seen his talents already. Jay maintains something that I neglected to mention, which is the Flutter Community GitHub. You definitely need to tell people what that has to offer, but there are a lot of packages there. They're finding maintainers for it to make sure that the packages don't end up orphaned. Okay, Ronnie Davis.
Great.
I'm sorry. He's going to escape the heat in Orlando.
Tip.
I'm getting it all. PK, why are you sitting back there? Hello. On YouTube, you know him as MTech Viral. And because Misery Loves Company, we're not going to be stuck up here alone. Frederick.
Yeah, come on, Frederick.
And Nash. You already know that Nash runs Flutter Community Medium. What you may not know is that Frederick and Nash, how many people remember a little something called the Flutter Hackathon? Anybody? Frederick and Nash were frantically running the live feed behind the scenes for a good, 18 hours? They were ready to die. Norbert, don't you think you're getting out of this? Norbert Gossier wrote the book on the 3 layers of Flutter. Okay, there's an excellent article out there on Medium about the widget layer, the element layer, and the render layer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about 1/4 of the people out there working to help build an infrastructure for you to learn. Okay, so, and for everybody else who's not able to be here, this is the Flutter community. And questions for anyone but me?
There you go. It's got yeah, more mic. More mic.
It's not a technical question. I'm just a bit surprised that there's no woman in the team.
They couldn't be here.
Okay.
Yes, there are quite a few. There is, what, in the wall? There's Pooja.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Come on, guys, keep going.
Next year.
Eli.
Okay, that's good. Great.
And let's not forget Daniela. Okay. They just couldn't be here. But believe me, they're there.
Okay, no, thank you.
Yesterday, I love it. Yes, over the event, we got so
Actually, I really have to say on this topic that compared to other tech stacks that I have been working with before, Flutter is really one of the most inclusive communities that I have met. And I also have never seen so many women really working with some technology like in Flutter.
Good.
Yeah.
I asked the question because I do a lot of work in the women tech space in London.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next questions.
Any questions?
About anything.
Any questions?
Axel.
So, obviously, if you're doing some Flutter development, you want to be able to get your app running quickly. So, what computer architecture, we're talking about hardware, can get your code up and running as quickly as possible? So, we're talking about is it the number of CPUs you have, cores, or how much cache you have? What kind of computer architecture is ideal for, getting your app built quickly so that you can see it? Because, how reload is great, but you can't use that all the time. So what kind of architecture is best for this? So cache, CPU, parallelism. What's that?
So you're talking about what is the best type of system to run, to develop on rather than to run the code?
Yeah, to develop. So you're developing the
Big
code,
powerful computer.
and you want to
became the Flutter engineering tools are compiled for both Darwin, x86 and x64. So pretty much most general purpose computer. The Dart runtime uses isolates, which are actually single threaded. So in truthfulness, they don't ease up that much in terms of running it locally. So one of the things that Norbert and I experimented with last year was running these things on desktop directly, and means that you get rid of the emulation layer. So you're not emulating an Android or an iOS device or simulating an iOS device on your local machine. Instead, you just run the application directly on your desktop. And you can now do that. So since yesterday, it's beta, is it? Mac is now beta. Alpha? Beta. Went to beta and Mac's Alpha. So I honestly do, if you're talking about like speed of development and trying to get up and working without lots of layers of development tooling in between, I'd just say just start developing Mac OS X desktop. Because you will just be developing directly on your desktop machine if you're running Mac.
Right, but the hardware, like, you know, how many processors do you want? Parallelism? Do you want the fastest processor? Do you want L2 cache? Do you want, is it memory?
To be honest,
what's kind of the best thing to get the compiler to run as quickly as possible?
Modern compilers. There is no, I wouldn't give you any direct answer to that. That's the problem, because to be honest, the stats that I've seen haven't been the marginal at best, so you're going to get some similar performance across the board on most modern systems. Obviously, if you've got a system that's like 5 years old, it's not going to perform as good as a new modern one. But the Dart itself is not. You can run some pretty old machines. I mean, we've got a guy in London that's actually been compiling the Flutter engine and the Dart SDK for ARM and running on a Pinebook 64, which is £200 to buy, and it works. And you can develop on it, so, you know,
Maybe. I think the best answer is have an SSD.
Yeah,
Have an SSD, that fix everything. Even if it's like 6 years old, the SSD is gonna make a change. And even if you don't have a device which it takes the part of the emulation, which is you don't need a lot of RAM for that one if you have that. But even if you don't have a device, now with Flutter Web is on dev, like pretty much a beta, you can have it in a browser. You can have pretty much like I won't say a Chromebook, but something similar to that one that it costs like $300, $200. You can actually run on the web. And I find sometimes easier to create a Flutter web project to make it faster. Since 1.9 I think is everything you can run on that one. And don't get with the deals like, okay, it needs to compile now, it needs to compile now. On web, just hit the Chrome run and just it does so quick. So
Maybe I can just a little bit more. I think you can get a little bit more precise answer in this way. That most compiling is done single-threaded. So if you are buying a new machine, aim for for a higher clock rate and not for more cores. Yeah, it wouldn't help you. The other thing is
It's not parallel.
But yeah, it's not parallel. The other thing that Mariano said, really disk speed is a topic. For example, if you are crazy like me, I run two NVMe SSD as RAID 0 in a PC, which is really classically fast. But you don't need this really. But in the end, a desktop machine that is a powerful desktop machine will be most of the time the better solution if you don't need to travel around all the time.
Okay, but before we do anything else real quick, I just want to correct an error that I did, okay? We missed one person who was part of the core group here since Alpha. Martin, stop working the camera and get up here. If we don't run out of time here, Jay runs a program with the Flutter Community GitHub that can do so much for you. I really think it's important that you let them know what it can do for them.
Sure. So the Flutter community consists of multiple facets. So one is the chats that we have, multiple like Slack channels and Discord and all that. And then there's the Medium that's run by a lot of other people here. And then there's the GitHub as well. So on the Flutter community GitHub, we collect packages that are made by the community. And we basically make sure that there are these quality checks in place so that, for example, documentation platforms if it's meant to run on those. And also, like we regularly see, especially when Dart 2 was announced, there were a lot of packages that were outdated and weren't updated at all. So they were Dart 2 incompatible, which means they wouldn't run at all in most cases. So what we try to do is we try as soon as we try to always keep a maintainer around to maintain those packages, pull MPRs or reject them in a timely fashion and handle issues so that these packages don't die out as soon as updates come around. And then if a maintainer wants to leave, we try to find a new one so that these packages aren't lost to time, basically. And there's a bunch of in there. Get It is in there. We are about to get Redux in there as well, which I'm really happy about.
And his packages is many.
Oh yeah, definitely. So Brody has a bunch of stuff in there as well. So it's from all over the place, and it's really good. So it's sort of this seal of approval, especially with Flutter Fragrance, which is really cool. Basically to keep this ecosystem of the community side of the packages, keep it alive and make sure that it's here to stay.
I do want to mention, you just mentioned it, I'm part of the Flutter Ecosystem Committee, which is a new entity that's just been described. Another thing. But if you look at Flutter favorites, it sort of comes from this idea of trying to sort of gold star packages that are the ones that you should be looking at. So we've seen over the last few years several packages that do the very similar job, and then you have to decide for yourself which one has the most features of one, which one has the most compatibility, and it's very hard to make those decisions. So the idea of the committee is that we're looking into these packages, and when we find one, it doesn't have to be part of the community. We go to those authors and make sure that they're updating, and make sure the documentation is there, and it meets a certain criteria, has a code review done on it. And once these packages meet a certain criteria, then they're marked down as Flutter favorites, and those are listed separately on pub.dev. And then that way you can, they also have a symbol on pub.dev, so you can identify that these packages are ones that have been vetted, that ones that have been sort of approved is the wrong word, but have gone through some sort of criteria specifications. There you go.
There's one more thing that I didn't mention before, sorry to interrupt. So some more experienced Flutter developers might have seen that there are multiple packages that do basically the same thing, but they're all missing one feature that the other one doesn't have, or one is improperly documented, or is the same package 5 times over. I've seen that happen as well, so what we try to do is as soon as a new package comes in, I try to see if there are similar packages around and either make them deprecated or at least get some form of agreement on those so that there's one final package that's well maintained, that does the job correctly, so that you don't have to look around for all these other ones that are unmaintained and it's just a mess. So that's one of the more important things that I try to keep in mind when doing the GitHub stuff.
Okay, well, this is supposed to be for you all to ask questions.
Yes, sorry about that.
Maybe direct it over that side of the line because they're getting out of this.
So in terms of software architecture, is there a recommended or a community agreed upon one? Or is it all up here on debate and just...
I would say, depending on who you ask. I could say easily, RxJS now, but depending on who you ask here, you will get a lot of different answers.
I think we get different answers from everyone.
Because it's really, besides that, you have to see for what application which architecture is fitting. A lot of really is also just a matter of taste. The style that you are comfortable with, for example, if you are already comfortable with Rx and scripts, maybe RxJS might be the right thing. If you are coming from Redux, for example, which is on JavaScript, pretty popular, then definitely it might be the best way to continue with Redux.
I would say if you come from Android and you're familiar with dependency injection and Dagger 2, I think the multi-provider feels kind of like home, because you have that kind of dependency injection kind of stuff into your app. So if you come from that side, you will feel more welcome into that one.
Pick what's proper, what's the right way to do it for the project, and then you can filter a few down, and then you're left with maybe 2 or 3, then choose what's best for your team or what you have experience with. It really depends on the project.
And it'll be faster if you choose something you're comfortable with, rather than waste 3 days trying to learn something different that isn't any more efficient than what you already know.
And another important thing that Brian Egan, who's a guy who's done many of the packages on state management on Flutter, think about onboarding, so don't like pick 5 patterns and mix them, because onboarding, getting a new developer in, is going to be a hassle and will take weeks to learn. Choose something concise, simple, that does the job well, maybe pull some other parts in from other state management patterns, but keep it simple and concise, is my...
We got a question in the back.
Yeah.
So, question regarding Flutter Web. Is there an ability to generate individual HTML pages, like for example, index the HTML, about the HTML, contact me.html, because
Yes.
I'm old school, I like individual.
I did that when I created the game. That was my first option, just like, how do I create that? I didn't know anything about web, but I know that everything has an HTML. But no one does like index.html. People that come, download, privacy, etc. is an option, you can do it. It will create a lot of boilerplate files that you don't need it. The other option that I came with was get one index and have like a slash, and then I will create the path, I will slash the path, get whatever the user try to get it, and make the roots inside the app not useful. Use the root settings. That's the best option.
It actually is possible. There's 3 different approaches you can take. One is using routes in Flutter. You can also actually put your other HTML files inside the same Flutter web repo. So when you publish it, you'll have access to those automatically. And the third option, which I've been using a lot more frequently, is you can use Firebase redirects. So you can actually return a function and have it go to and return HTML content on Flutter Web. So you can have full flexibility there, and it works really well.
Is it SEO friendly?
Yes, it is. You can also, even if you want to, manually publish source maps of all your routes on your website as well, if you don't want it to let it crawl automatically.
And it also supports accessibility, which makes it SEO friendly as well.
Yeah.
Just remember there is a JavaScript file at the end of the day,
So it's just about JavaScript and you interject the content, right?
Yes, or you can do it dynamically as well. Yeah. You can have it statically or dynamically generated.
that was, yes.
So I'm really new to Flutter. I've developed with Android before, and I just want to know what are some what are some drawbacks to Flutter at the moment, and how are there some issues that are in development in the open source? That we could.
As a new person, the main thing to know, and I say this in a lot of talks, you have to remember what Flutter is and what Flutter is not. People keep saying, you'll keep hearing, oh, Flutter is going to replace Android. Android is an operating system. Flutter is a UI toolkit. Okay, you can't replace a shovel with a pick. It doesn't work. So Flutter is about your UI. It does not have direct access to things like the camera, the IMU, the GPS, a lot of those other things. Now there are plugins that make it a lot easier. But the fact is Flutter is a UI toolkit that has a lot of great capability to handle its own back end. So, and sometimes you might see on Reddit, surprise, surprise, not everything on Reddit is positive. So you might see some people say, oh, Flutter sucks because it can't access the camera. You know, I can turn around and say that Android sucks because it doesn't fold my laundry. It doesn't make it true. Android's not supposed to fold my laundry. Flutter's not supposed to access the hardware directly. That's the big drawback. Okay, on the other hand, the big plus is that you are not dependent on the native widgets in the other operating systems. You get to control everything yourself, and you can use the easy-to-use built-in stuff, or you can create fantastic-looking things custom.
Yeah. Also, you got limitations that depend on what you wanted to do. Sometimes, if you have the NDK that you want to get C++ code until FFI is completely done, it's not the best option. Sometimes
It works.
Yeah.
Works good. It works. We did it complicated.
But until that point came, no one was trying to do anything with C++. For example, the guys from Realm.io, which is a good database that it works for Android and iOS, they didn't want to port to Flutter because they didn't have that one. And all the performance was going trying to communicate back and forth between channels. And then the channel from the NDK from the Java and blah blah blah, going back and forth, and you lose performance.
Also, one thing to remember is like Flutter is already 2 years old, but still quite early in some ways. So the Android ecosystem is quite old and has a lot of things. And it's like you may stumble upon something which isn't completely implemented yet, so you may have to do that on your own for a few edge cases.
I can give you an edge case that happened recently. It was a while ago now, actually. Android 10 and it's Android 10, yeah. The edge swiping. So I needed to exclude part of the edge swipe, and that wasn't in the Flutter framework. However, I can just call across a platform channel, which is how you communicate with the host operating system, and I just called the APIs on Android. And then I had that functionality there. So anything you can do in Android, you can continue to do with Flutter. You just need to add that bit yourself, right? No one's done that for you. So like the camera plugins done by the Flutter team, it's equally possible that there's like TensorFlow Lite plugins and other things done by other people that is in these community plugins. So if you find something that you need to use and it doesn't exist, easily make it yourself. It's still going to be less code, because you still would have had to do that anyway when it comes to doing it on Android or on iOS. So still get the best of both worlds. But downsides, you mentioned downsides, still, this is still the case. If you need to put, let's say you get given an SDK from a third party, you don't have that source code. You can't maybe call the APIs directly. You need to use that. This means you either need to make platform channels and call across the bridge to the SDK, depending on how many API calls there is. It might be costly and expensive in terms of time. But the other side of that is also if these libraries have native views, Android views or iOS views that you need to display inside Flutter, the only way currently to do that is to use, it's actually called Android view inside the Flutter widgets, and it wraps a native Android view with, it's actually done with a separate display in Android. It's called a presentation display, so we can just capture that widget and take the display and put it inside Flutter. But it's expensive. If you had hundreds of widgets that were like this, your whole app would go to sort of crawl because it's having to update hundreds of screens. It's a workaround, because the idea is that you don't really want to do that. It's still going to be, it's always going to be non-performant because you're crossing 2D boundaries. So it works to get to a certain point, but really truthfully, once that development team or once the SDK owner realizes that people want to use Flutter, we're hoping that they would then go implement their SDK in Dart or in something that would give it a native, an integrated experience.
Just I want to make that to head, or already touched this. If you have, actually Flutter has with the plugin system a really good infrastructure to access native apps, native APIs. But if your app needs a huge amount of native APIs where no plugin exists, it will be just too much work to implement all this API call, this platform channels for this. And this is one of the reasons. Actually, I think one of the reason if you miss plugins that you really need for your project, this is one of the biggest drawbacks. Otherwise, I would say we are pretty good currently.
But with that, that's a great option to use Add App, which got recently a lot more stable. So even if you want to keep all your Android screens, you can actually just start with individual screens and use Flutter that way. So yeah.
Actually, I didn't see any announcements yesterday, but something to mention. The plugin architecture was upgraded recently to the embedded version 2 API, and that has promoted Add to App. There's a new Add to App system which actually lets you start multiple Flutter engines within one application, so you can actually have multiple pages that are using Flutter and not just one single one at once. And it doesn't conflict with multiple plugins running and various things. It's worth looking into the new APIs they are documented. So.
One thing for fun, all right, so that they hear from everybody take your microphones and shift them one back.
Okay, we got 2 questions over here.
In the front?
Yeah.
Shoot me.
In the front.
Yeah.
Alright, so personally I use both Windows and Mac to develop Flutter, and I use GitHub to sync the code. I found my 8 GB Mac with 8 GB RAM faster than my 32 GB Windows. The difference is SSD, as you just mentioned. So when I discovered Code Magic, I was amazed by the options. They can compile all the platforms at the same time. And I think Flutter is the first tool or the language that you can code once and deploy to all the platforms. We just have Xamarin, develop once, deploy to Android and iOS, and we have GTK to cover, or Qt to cover desktop platforms, but Flutter is the first time. So I'm originated from China, and I see a lot of Chinese companies, especially internet companies, are using Flutter heavily. It's like a faster adaptation rate than US companies or newer companies. Yeah. So and I'm surprised with the expansion of Flutter because it started with Android and iOS. Then while I was testing the Flutter web, it was still in development channel. So now today it's moved to beta channel, and the macOS is available. I read a blog post from the Flutter team in Google who saying that macOS was the easiest to develop because it's closer to the iOS, then Linux, then Windows. But this speed is already amazing. So what do you see in like 3 years?
And one quick point to that, I discussed this at I.O., the separation between the Chinese communities and the rest of the world. The Chinese Flutter community, that we need to understand in the Western world, they are 6 months ahead of us in everything. Okay, the Flutter team looked at this and they said that there are articles being written in Chinese right now that are doing things and looking at things we haven't even thought of yet. Okay, and it has been that way for a couple of years. So the Chinese Flutter community, it's almost worth it trying to learn to read Chinese because you'll learn so much more. So the next 3 years?
The next 3 years are gonna be nice, I think. I mean, as far as I can see, like everything will just develop further, as far as I can see it. So whereas web is now in beta, it should be like fully stable, but I think macOS will be there as well, and Windows and Linux probably as well. If we see the last 2 years its progress, then the next 3 years will be amazing probably. As far as support for platforms go, what I'm excited about is the things that specifically some platforms can do and some other platforms can. So if you run a Flutter app on Mac now, for example, you'll still get the regular top bar. That's just like the gray bar with the closing icons, all that. So there's special functionality there that you can do on Mac apps, and Windows has similar functionality. So I'm curious to see what platform-specific things we'll be able to do at that time, at the point where you won't even notice a difference really between developing natively and developing like a Flutter multi-platform app. So yeah, in general, just better support, bigger community, and a lot of fun.
I have one. I think for high schools and college, they always tend to teach you Python or Java or other languages, but the kids tend to be don't like it because they teach you algorithms and stuff, and they don't see real cases scenarios of how to use it in the future. I think Flutter being, even on the web, people are creating pseudo IDEs. So the idea to have like a web IDE for Flutter and actually creating apps for Flutter, being a teenager or something like could be really excited. So I clearly see in 2 or 3 years people having $100 tablet and actually coding an app, and not just like a snippet or an algorithm made on Python. Actually making apps that they could show to their friends or their family. So doing useful stuff with such a cheap device. And I'm not seeing our platform being able to do that.
Also, I would like to add something to that. Right now we are viewing everything from what we already know from the last, let's say, 15 years of mobile development, right, from this standpoint. But actually, I think Flutter is the first framework that actually enables us to have a paradigm shift in user experience itself, because you have this framework that is not bound to like a view framework or a view hierarchy or whatever that has been there for the last 15 years, and it's completely independent from the system itself. And I think most of us didn't really like tap into the potential what you can actually do with Flutter yet. And I think we will see over the next 1 or 2 years a lot of like cool examples of what you can actually do with it. Thinking of it as a UI toolkit more, like a UI framework. And yeah, I think this is something where we still have to rethink a little bit, because we also have to redesign maybe how we build user interfaces, because we just have done that around those frameworks that were given to us by Apple or Google or Microsoft. Is Microsoft involved still a thing? I don't know. But yeah, and then we were just building around that kind of design language, and this design language needs to be redefined, and this can be redefined by us, and I think this is a way more interesting point, instead of just, I mean, there's really cool things as you can build an IDE that runs Flutter code which is written in Flutter and stuff like that, like this kind of inception thing, you know? But still, I think there's way more to explore, and I think this widget system that Flutter uses is really special and performant for that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I would like to add one point. So I personally think that three years is a very long time, because last year in November, I guess, I went for the GD Summit in Mountain View, and I was talking to Flutter engineers that what you guys are planning for the web and desktop. So they were like, oh no, we are not gonna focus on web and desktop right now. We will be doing Android and iOS for maybe next couple of years. And I was surprised when next month they announced the web. I was like, how that happened? So it's like because maybe a lot of the things like has been done by the community. In fact, the desktop thing was brought by people in the community and the web as well. So the beauty about Flutter is that this flexibility is the cool thing. I mean, it is not restricted by any operating system. You can, maybe someone will be using it with Tizen OS or maybe all those cool stuff. So nobody knows where the tech industry is going. Maybe nobody knows about the next month. So 3 years is a long time. But yeah, there are a lot of cool things happening. Even in, if you have seen the Flutter Interact yesterday, we also didn't know that Adobe is also bringing these kind of cool stuff. Or there are many companies who are trying to do a lot of stuff. So let's see. Let's hope for the best.
Yeah. Oh, Mark.
Actually, something I haven't heard mentioned is actually Fuchsia, right? So 3 years, we're probably going to see Fuchsia see the light of day, which nobody knows what that is, but probably. I mean, it's a big gamble by Google into a new operating system where they've written the operating system from the ground up. So it's not Linux-based; it's a full stack microkernel architecture, sort of super fast on low power devices, and Flutter's the UI layer for that, right? So that's a huge thing, right? That may really change the name of the game. Some other things that may happen, I probably could see deeper integration with Rybak, right? I could see that being just part of Flutter in the future at some point. What else? I could see more mature plugin implementations across like web and desktop, so you can have, like yesterday they showed like 6 plugins that work on web now. Maybe we'll have hundreds that will work on web, desktop, mobile, and then you'll have all that ability. FFI, native integration with mature C native libraries. It's going to be awesome, so stick around.
Just on that point, the new interface that they're using for web, but if you actually have plugins you want to make them web compatible, it's called Platform Interface. If you look at any one of those plugins in the source tree, you'll find out how it's done. There is documentation. I believe it's live now. So if you actually have got community plugins that you're trying to get on web, raise an issue ticket with them, point them at the data and say, look, please, can I contribute, do PR, And as we're saying, as Ikkesh was saying, that you're talking about the future, it's open source. right? If you want to make a change, you can contribute and make the change. Try to do that on Android. Honestly, it's always, but it's such a pain. It really is. It's nowhere near. Just clone the repo, make a change to your unit test, verify they work, push that back, and it's there.
Yeah. So in 3 years, what I'm hoping for is a mature ecosystem. So right now we have some packages, they work on iOS and Android, but they don't work on web. Some would work on Android, but not iOS. So 3 years, what I'm hoping for is like a really mature ecosystem where packages, they work across platforms, well, supported platforms. And also adding to new platforms, I'm hoping that one day we'll be able to use Flutter to build watches. So watch faces and Wear OS apps. So that's my hopes for the next 3 years.
Okay, I've got one other addition, and this gentleman's been waiting quite a long time here.
Yeah, so I totally jumped up here. I wasn't up here, but you mentioned about they wrote the article about desktop being kind of great, but yet it's still not in beta, but web is. So I just wanted to add some context that I think like you kind of touched on it, and we still look to Google to signal like what is important, like what is good. When we look at them, they're a huge company, right? Like that event yesterday was like, it's been over $1 million or something like that, right? They have tons of money. We expect them to have all these resources, but given the scale and the scope of what they're doing, they also are still resource constrained. Like even within Google, like you're talking about Android and Flutter, So just keep that in mind. I asked us some questions. Like, we were talking about desktop runs awesome. Super high performance, incredible hardware. You run it on there, and look, it's great, And how did web kind of supersede it? And I think Tim said it. He was like, well, it was actually the harder technical challenge. So when you gotta think from their perspective, they're thinking, where do we put investment, right? Like we have limited resources. What are we going to invest in that's going to move the needle the most? And so even though you could have said, well, desktop is a really great platform, it's really high performance, that wasn't really where they felt like the strong technical challenge, like where they could put their effort and their bulk to move the needle the most. So, I think you gotta think about it like that, but when you're thinking ahead, you gotta remember Google's a business, they have limited resources, they gotta do these things and they're growing and we see all these great trends. But, like when you think about the future, it's like, you gotta think about what they're thinking about, what their motivations are, and the open source part. That's what's really cool, is that you can contribute, like you can work on these things, you can try new things, like you see really cool things like Sprite Widget and Flame and these people, and like we were talking about games, like at the party before, like we built up these games and we were asking like, oh man, it's such a game engine, and they said that they were actually trying really hard not to go down that path because they didn't want people to think of them in that way. They wanted to think of them in this sort of more universal, framework. So it's just because Google is signaling certain things doesn't mean that that's what you should be thinking about or like what the future actually is. You also have an opportunity to kind of make it, be part of the community and really push on it. So.
And I would say the complete opposite. It's like sometimes Google is so invested building Flutter that they lose track what it's being used for.
Mm-hmm.
So the mad and others, it's like, oh, I didn't know you guys will use it for that.
Yeah.
So you move the needle the other way around. It's like, okay, Google will check the community to see what they're using for it, and then just keep pushing it that way.
Yeah, a lot of the Flutter developers are not. The developers of Flutter are not Flutter developers.
Yes.
Well, one other thing too. A lot of us know the members of the team. They're overwhelmed. Period. They have asked for people to come up with things and push them. The people maintaining the repo. If you push something, if it's decent, it's probably going to end up in the SDK. Don't wait for them to do it. If you think it's a good idea, do it. Okay, now about the 3-year thing real quick. That goes back to a conversation that Simon and I had recently where what I want to see and what I think is going to happen is it's going to turn the entire way we think about layout on its head. Okay, now what I mean by that is the whole idea of picking a size is gone. You don't do it. You can turn around and take a media query in your safe area, figure out what you have to work with. Then you set a margin of 3% of that going around, and that's your margin or your padding. And then you make what's inside of it take as much space as possible. Okay, now you can flip that device around in any direction and it will recalculate. You have no idea how many DP it's going to be, you don't care. Your ratios are going to be the same, no matter what. So we've got to break away from thinking about what size something is and start thinking about ratios and percentages and let the framework adapt.
Yeah, try to do that in Android.
I just would also really encourage you to contribute to the Flutter Meetup curriculum. One question that we pretty often see is, yeah, but where do I start? Where should I start? And I only can paraphrase Hixie, and he said, start with something that annoys you in the current situation. Fix it in a way that you think it makes sense, and make a PR. And this is the best way to get started and to help to get everything working. And it's really the case, the Flutter SDK is easy to read, the source code. It's really, you can understand what's going on there. So you don't have to be an absolutely Flutter genius to start working on it.
Okay, I think we're committing another crime here. We're making this gentleman wait longer to ask his question than it takes for Gradle to build.
Jonathan,
You good?
Jonathan, what's your question?
Good.
Go for it.
I was going to add something on top of what you're saying, that if you think Flutter is going to finally going to be something that Google is going to unify what they target, do you think Flutter is going to make Angular disappear? Or we're going to still have different things from the same company pushing different technologies? Or they're doing the same things?
That's a sign.
What I would say is I think that's everyone in this room's hopes and joys of just saying, oh no, let's just do everything in Flutter. I would hope it eventually be that way. Personally, I would hope it eventually be that way, that everything becomes Flutter, but I can't see that. Investments have been made by many companies, a lot of money in their own apps that are done in Android and so on. They're not going to just go, oh, let's just rebuild it in Flutter. It just doesn't happen.
Flutter's not good. Yeah, Facebook is not going to throw it.
Yeah. However, I think if the demand from the developer population is that Flutter is the thing, it will eventually move in that direction. And that's what we've been seeing. The uptake of Flutter has been huge. Every developer that I've spoken to that's been an Android developer at least, they try using Dart, they try using Flutter, and they're hooked. They're like, oh no, this is brilliant. This is what I wanted from Android for the last X number of years, however long they've been doing it for. So, the hope is the more people that use it, the more weight is behind the decision, and eventually it will make decisions, but it's a progressive thing.
All right, now it's getting late, so we have one more question, or yeah. Mike or Tom, do it now.
You go ahead. Look, being a Flutter group organizer, I should ask the question that I get the most from people that turn up to our meetups in Melbourne, and that is, when's Flutter going to be a thing? When am I going to be able to get a job as Flutter? It's kind of a weird question, and the answer is always I get, without a doubt.
It depends where you are. If you want to move to China, or in the Middle East, boom, you're already there.
Submit your...
Yeah, you got Flutter jobs. You can search into Flutter jobs. But there's also, in my case, when the previous job that I created my Flutter job. The CEO of the company saw my game that I built for multi-platform. It's like, hey, can we build this on our own app? I was like, sure. And I did like an MVP in a week. He was like, oh my god, just do it. And 4 months on it, the app's pretty much done in Flutter. So I created my own Flutter job, showing what Flutter is capable.
Yeah, so we're a consulting company that makes apps, right? So I think being on the forefront of that, we get people coming to us wanting to make applications. And it used to be that you would have to kind of explain this, right? And you'd be like, have you heard of React Native? Well, it's kind of like that, but better, I would say over the last 3 months, maybe 4 months, I don't know what happened. It was like summer ended and everyone went back to work, and it's like they were reading about Flutter over the summer or something, and then they got back and their boss was like, hey, we gotta fix our apps, and then they're like, oh, I read about Flutter, and I'm like, yeah, do it. I think
to be honest, the business case is just way too strong. You know, it's well, honestly, like that's why we have these kits. That's why people start through PhoneGap, Cordova, React Native, Xamarin, Flutter. You know, to be honest, like we all love Flutter. We hope it's the future, but the truth is that something else could come out next year that's even better. That's just the world's technology. Like, it's just the way that it is. But what I'll say is that I feel like I'm not just talking about startups. If you're a startup, it's a no-brainer, right? You're building a new app. Like, why would you? Why? Yeah, I mean, unless your team is like awesome, and if you have really great architecture, right? So, for instance, we're kind of good friends with Wes Billman, who's one of the lead mobile engineers at Compass, and he had a really good point. He was like, if your architecture is good, if your team is really good, if you have great tooling, and you can just add features to your native Android and your native iOS app really easily, and you're perfectly set up, the benefits of Flutter like really aren't that strong anymore. If your team is super well set up and your code is really clean, your architecture is really strong. But turns out, most companies don't work that way. Most companies, it's really complicated. You get turnover on your team. You try different architectures. You have, maybe the iOS app has, in-memory storage, and on Android you have like MySQLite or something like that. You have all these different patterns, and all of a sudden you get all this effort to add a feature or do a change. And so I think the companies that are starting to see this business case, I've been talking about it's a competitive advantage. If you do it now, you're going to move faster. The thing is, like, in a consulting business, you say, 2 for 1. You're like, wait a second, this sounds like a terrible business model. I'm trying to, like, actually do more work, and it's a bad thing. But so the way you flip it around is you say, it's not about that. It's about doing twice as much. It's about moving twice as fast as your competition. It's about creating a competitive advantage. So if a company is out there, they have 2 native teams, they have 2 design teams, they have 2 product management teams, they have 2 QA teams, they have all this stuff. And then somebody else comes along and they make this investment and they switch over. I look at it as that they move twice as fast. And if you want to make the CFO happy, maybe you shave 10% off the budget. Hey, we'll give them that a little bit. And that's what I think it is, and I think people are starting to wake up with it, because people that we've been fortunate enough to be talking to recently, these are $100 million raised companies with 20+ person engineering teams they're coming in like, okay, how do we make this shift? I'm gonna say, I think the phrase that in consulting there's like digital transformation. Business transformation. It's like you make a website, you're a consulting company, you put business transformation on there, you're good. Flutter transformation. You got it right here, TM. Because I think if you're starting out new, if you're building a brand new app, right? Like I said, it's no brainer. But if you have a team of 20, 30, 40 people, how do you make that shift? That's where I think about the ERP days, right? When SAP came out, you were suddenly turning all these big companies that had 100-person teams that were making, one of my early projects was working with Sony Electronics, this green screen thing built in the 70s. Massive 200-person team shifting them over, because it's that kind of complexity. I think that, for me, I think that's the future of what Flutter could be, is these big companies transitioning over, because you could spend a ton of money transitioning your business over to it in order to get the speed and performance and efficiencies that come with building once, consolidating that stuff. And there's other things too, think about legal risk, right? When GDPR came out, you had to make these changes to your app and do all these things. You gotta do all that stuff twice, you gotta check all that stuff twice. And these are real legal risks happening in your application. So I think it is happening now. Obviously, I'm pretty biased, hoping that that's very true. But the types of people that are interested in it, I think, are different now. And I think we're going to start to see, next year's event, I think it might be very different in terms of the types of companies that are participating and talking about it.
Really?
Yeah, I was going to say with that too, I came from a really business background. We were very invested in native platforms on iOS and Android. And I think some of the best Flutter developers are truly unlocked when you take your native skills and you combine it with Flutter. Because one of the things, the reason why I'm able to make so many packages is because I know the Swift and I also know the Java. And also now I know JavaScript and the web. So you're still a mobile engineer, you're still an engineer on the web, you're still a desktop engineer. But the power that Flutter gives you is being able to be an engineer in multiple places and build things 10 times faster than the person beside you. So you can still get a job as a regular iOS developer or an Android developer or web developer and still use that and then do like an incremental adoption and join with Flutter as a tool set that you have in your belt and use that, and when the opportunity comes up, you're in a great position because you can transition their app incrementally or over time, and you can also help train a company from the inside out, because not every company is going to start with Flutter from the beginning, but once they see how fast it is, you can also be the person that now is ahead, the mobile Flutter lead at that company. So I would say regular developers, iOS and Android, willing to learn Flutter, make the best Flutter hires.
So just to refine that question a bit, thank you, Dave, for answering that, because I know you're pretty close, being a consulting company, to the answer. But just to nuance that question a little bit, does everyone else feel like it's starting to change now?
Oh, yes. Yes. And if you know the Flutter channel or Flutter Twitter account, Flutter Jobs, and I think every second day we see new Flutter Jobs popping in there.
FlutterJobs.info.
Flutter.info, and if you follow it on Twitter, for example, it's really remarkable. A lot of them in UK we see, a lot in India, very much, but also in America. Yeah? Unfortunately, not in Germany. At least not so much.
Imagine if they listed in Chinese.
And one thing, if you are a software house that builds apps. He said, David mentioned before, okay, in the first you could say, hey, we don't earn as much money than before because we do not earn as much work. But there's another point of view, you could say, hey, my potential market just grew a lot because companies who couldn't afford before to have two teams, to have to pay two teams, you can now say, hey, for the price you pay for one app, and now you get two.
More and more.
More, yeah, definitely.
And I think one of the things that's really cool is like eBay Motors was on the. Did you meet them? Like they were super nice people, and talking to them, it's not like Google paid them to make. There's no more pay for play. I keep asking them, hey, can you guys, that era of Google and Flutter is over, and they did a legitimate analysis. They were going to build something new, and they evaluated. And I think you see a lot of these articles now, like the Nubank one, Dan from Policy Genius did one where Policy Genius, who we work with, is a good example, right? They're a React shop. They were web, mostly React. So you think if you have a lot of React developers, it seems like they probably would just do React Native, right? And he did a very thorough analysis, and they were like, no, Flutter's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to pick. And I think you see more of these things where these aren't just like wins. This isn't like, hey, this is fun. I'm doing this on the weekends. I'm going to do this. These companies do thorough analysis, and they're picking it, and they're doing it of their own volition, which was what I thought was cool about the eBay team that we talked to.
And another way to look at this, same question, but from an answer from a different angle. Martin McGinnis, lead of marketing for the Flutter team. There's a reason that Forbes is paying attention to him and named him to the 30 under 30.
Yes.
Okay, they're watching. Forbes knows what's going on with Flutter. They've put out 2 Flutter positive articles ever since Alpha. One of them said in 2019, you're going to hear Flutter and Fuchsia everywhere. Here's your chance to get out of the curve. Now, a year later, they named Martin to 30 under 30. They're watching Flutter. They're watching closely. Okay, and if Forbes is watching, there must be a reason that people in business will be watching too. Sir, you've been waiting quite a while.
No worries. I can ask Martin later. But if the panel wants to take a crack at it, so I can use a global key to sort of pass around a global key to get at faraway state. Always feels a little gross. Is it ever not gross?
Shift.
Yeah, that's a hard.
I mean, you're more experienced in this than I am, but that's always the case. Yeah, you are as well. My short answer would be what I've seen using a global key to reference something more like higher in the tree is sometimes an approach, but maybe not the best one, because you could could look something up in other ways in the tree, or
Right.
not even use the tree at all.
Right.
So it really depends on the use case. I know what you're saying when it feels kind of gross because there's not a lot of assertions you can do during runtime to know if that thing is there. And you might depend on the string to grab that global key, for example. It depends on the use case, but there are other ways to do it. And maybe one of these.
It almost feels like we're falling into the black hole of state management.
Yes.
Yeah, no, without specifically getting into other alternatives, to another there, I was just wondering if there's a good use case for a global key as opposed to just rearrange everything better.
Navigators.
It's always gross. In truth, it's probably a misuse of global keys. The term global key people think is a global variable, and it's not. It can be treated as such, but the variable itself exists in the class that you create the variable in. You can pass the key down the tree, but then again, you're just pushing any variable down. It could just be a class of your own with your own statement. It doesn't have to be a key. It really depends on why you're needing that key in the first place. There are reasons to use global keys, and they're very far between. I mean, a lot of the time you're using global keys because you're trying to escape the paradigm of the way that widgets work in general. At that point, you're probably looking at generating elements and render objects. So if you find yourself using sort of global keys to try and get at context and size of widgets and other things like that, then you're using widgets wrong, basically. There are reasons to use global keys, as Rybak about the navigator and scaffold key and other things like that, forms. But these are when you're trying to access a variable that's definitely within some sort of scope of your UI and you're using for UI purposes. It really depends on use case.
Alright, you want to try?
Yeah, I mean, most of the times there are ways around, like lifting state up, or maybe even using builder widget, which gives you context to look up in the tree. But yeah, sometimes it's the only solution, and it's just the way it is.
Guys, we're going to have to wrap up because it's 10 o'clock and our hosts probably want to go home. Let's hear it for everybody. So before you leave, I want to get a picture of everybody here, so don't go anywhere. Thank you so much. This wraps up a pretty awesome Flutter week here in New York City. And